I need you to picture two workers. One is in the US, staring at their phone, sick as a dog, doing that math in their head. If I don't show up, can I pay rent? The other is in Norway, and the law basically says, you're not a machine. You're a person. And here's my mental conflict. How can Americans work more, hustle harder, and still feel one bad week away from chaos, while Norway can run a high-cost, high-tax society where workers get stronger protections and somehow the country doesn't collapse? For this video, I went down a rabbit hole, dozens of data points across laws, benefits, and OECD labor metrics, and the story that came out is not what I expected. And I'm going to drop one number right now, then I'll explain it at the very end. Norway's normal working hours legally cap at 40 hours per week, but the real shock is what that limit does to the entire power dynamic between worker and employer. Hold that thought, because that's the open loop. Welcome back to Nexera, the channel where we don't do surface-level vibes. We do comparisons that hurt, because the truth is usually uncomfortable. If you're tired of hot takes, political team sports, and people yelling, freedom, without showing you the spreadsheet behind the word, subscribe. Not as a favor, as a filter. Because on Nexera, we're building a small group of people who can look at a country and ask, what does the system actually produce for normal workers? And today, we're putting the US on the table as the baseline, and Norway as the variable that rewires the experiment. So let me be honest, as an American, whenever I hear Nordic worker paradise, my brain instantly goes, okay, cool, but what's the catch? Is everyone broke? Are taxes basically theft with a polite accent? Is it all only possible because oil money? And those are fair questions. But here's what hit me first. Vacation, Norway versus Sweden versus the US. Legal minimum, 25 working days of vacation. But here's the part Americans miss. 30 days, 5 weeks, is extremely common through collective agreements and workplace norms. So Norway's vacation isn't a perk culture. It's basically a baseline expectation, and the law is the floor, not the ceiling. Sweden's legal minimum is still 25 days, and that stays consistent. United States. In the US, there is still no federal law requiring paid vacation. Some workers get it, many don't, and the amount can depend on your industry, your status, and your employer's mood. So in human terms, Norway and Sweden treat vacation like maintenance. America treats vacation like a prize you earn by being valuable enough. That difference changes how you breathe. Because in the US, if your vacation comes from your employer's generosity, then your rest is basically leased. Quick pause, because if you're the type of person who hears no guaranteed paid vacation and thinks, wait, why do we accept that? You're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. Subscribe, not to support Nexera, but to confirm something about yourself. You don't accept the default story. You question the system. You want the receipts. All right, back to the comparison. Now let's talk sick time, because this is where the US versus Norway contrast gets almost cruel. Sick pay, Norway versus Sweden. In Norway, the employer covers sick pay for the first 16 calendar days. Not workdays, calendar days. That's important. After that, the public system takes over. Human translation. Norway treats sickness like a temporary life event. It's not, prove you deserve to rest. It's, recover, then come back. Sweden pays about 80% during the first 14 days, but Americans should know the fine print. There's typically a qualifying deduction, a first-day hit concept, and there are caps/limits in longer sickness benefits. Human translation. Sweden still supports you, but it reminds you, this is insurance logic, not unlimited generosity. Now I'm not going to oversimplify US sick leave because it's fragmented by employer and state. But here's the federal-level emotional reality. In America, a lot of worker stability still rests on whether your employer decided to include it, or whether you're in a state that forces the issue. Access is not the same as a right. And in a country where your health insurance often rides on your job, getting sick can feel like a threat to your identity, not just your body. Here's the plot twist that confirmed my suspicion and then wrecked it. Norway has no universal minimum wage law. You heard me. Norway does not have one single nationwide minimum wage across every sector. In many parts of the economy, wages are set by collective agreements or individual negotiations, and some sectors have enforced minimum rates. Meanwhile, in the US, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 per hour. So why would Norway, the worker paradise, not even have a universal minimum wage? Because Norway's protection model is less about one magic number and more about power. And that brings me to your dilemma. If you could pick one, would you rather get Norway-style 25 guaranteed vacation days, or keep a higher paycheck with the US system where paid vacation isn't guaranteed by law? Drop your answer and your reasoning. And yes, I'm reading the comments because I want to see whether you choose security or flexibility and what your life experience taught you. Power and bargaining, the invisible worker benefit. If you want to understand worker treatment, you can't just look at benefits. You have to look at the worker's ability to negotiate. Union membership/representation, US baseline. The newest BLS snapshot still lands basically here. Union membership, 10%, 9.9% for 2024. Workers represented by a union, 11.1%, 2024. So in the US, the majority of workers are still negotiating solo, one person versus an institution. Now compare that to the Nordic world where collective bargaining coverage is dramatically higher. Sweden's collective bargaining coverage is commonly cited around 88%. Norway's coverage is often summarized around 2/3. So here's the human translation. In the US, many workers negotiate alone, like a person trying to bargain rent with a landlord who owns the whole block. In Sweden and Norway, workers negotiate as coordinated groups in huge portions of the economy. That coordination doesn't just raise wages. It changes scheduling power, overtime expectations, how safe it feels to say no, and what getting fired even means socially. And it ties directly into our open-loop working hours. What the 40-hour rule really means, 9 to 12:30. Remember the hook? Norway's standard working hours are legally framed as max 9 hours per day, max 40 hours per week. And yes, many workplaces operate on 37.5 hours as a norm through agreements. Now, Americans hear 40 hours and go, okay, we have 40 hours too. That's normal. But here's the difference. In the US, 40 hours often means. That's where overtime pay might start, unless you're exempt, salaried, pressured, or your workplace culture punishes you for leaving. In Norway, the system is more comfortable saying, this is the boundary of normal. Beyond that, you're messing with someone's life. And when you combine 25 working days legal vacation and 30 commonly, stronger sick pay continuity, high collective bargaining coverage, you get a society where workers aren't constantly negotiating their right to be human. That's what Americans are reacting to, whether they admit it or not. But what about taxes? Norway taxes more. But here's the updated reality check. Norway's tax wedge for a single average worker is now often cited in the mid-35% range, roughly 35.3% to 35.8% depending on the specific OECD year note framing and methodology updates. So yes, still substantial. But here's the honest counter-question. What does your money buy? Because in the US, we pay in other ways. Out-of-pocket healthcare costs, risk premiums, lost wages from unpaid leave, medical debt or borrowing. And here's the part that hits like a truck. Americans borrowing money for medical bills is still being estimated at roughly $74 to $80 billion in recent survey-based reporting. That's not freedom. That's a private tax, paid in panic. The Norway healthcare cap, in human terms. Norway's system still uses co-pays, but here's the key psychological difference. There's an annual ceiling tied to the exemption card, frikort, system. For 2025/26, that ceiling is commonly cited around 3,165 Norwegian kroner, and it's adjusted over time. Translation. Norway doesn't pretend healthcare is free. It says, there is a maximum amount you'll be allowed to bleed in a year. The US does not offer that same universal emotional safety net. Norway taxes you like a subscription. America invoices you like a surprise mechanic. If you want the deeper investigation, how Sweden's model compares to Norway's on parental leave, worker protections, and the hidden trade-offs, subscribe so the algorithm actually delivers you the next episode in this series. Because this isn't a one-off video. This is a rolling audit. And you don't want YouTube feeding you noise when you could be getting the next chapter of the comparison. Sweden versus Norway versus USA, the family test. Let's do one more gut check category, having kids. Sweden. Sweden's parental insurance still gives parents 480 days total. And the structure matters. 390 days are income-based. 90 days are paid at a flat minimum level, commonly cited as 180 Swedish kronor per day in recent references. Norway's system still offers the classic choice. 49 weeks at 100% pay. 59 weeks at 80% pay. United States. The US still has no universal federal paid parental leave. The closest federal baseline many people cite is FMLA, up to 12 weeks unpaid for eligible workers. So here's the human translation. Sweden and Norway treat early parenthood like nation building. America treats it like a personal lifestyle choice you should have budgeted for. That's not me being dramatic. That's what the policy design implies. Time to close the open loop. I told you Norway's 40-hour cap wasn't the real shock. The real shock is what it produces. When working hours, vacation, and sickness rules are legal structure, not benefits. The worker stops living in a permanent state of negotiation. That changes everything. Your willingness to quit. Your ability to say no. Your ability to plan a family. Your ability to get sick without fear. And the result is, worker treatment becomes less about hope and more about math. So which country treats workers best? If we define best as stability, time, and dignity built into the default, Norway and Sweden beat the US baseline on the core structure. But if best means maximum upside for the lucky and highly leveraged, the US can feel unbeatable if you're on the winning side of employer power. That's the tension. That's the truth. And if you watched all the way to the end, real talk. You're the 1%. The minority that actually cares how systems work, not just how they sound. Welcome to the team. Like if this made you rethink what you assumed. Share it with a friend who thinks Europe is all taxes and sadness. And comment your choice on the dilemma, because I'm reading them. See you in the next audit.